Good evening, everyone. This is the East Aurora Union Free School District Board of Education meeting for Wednesday, March 15th, 2023. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May I have a motion to enter executive session to discuss the employment history of 5 particular employees and matters related to 5 particular students? So moved. Moved by Mrs. Danu, seconded by Ms. Zillweiler. Discussion. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We are returning from executive session where we discussed the employment history of 5 particular employees and matters related to 6 particular students. Are there any agenda changes?
Yes, one under item number 12, items requiring board action, item C.
Thank you. Any reports and discussion items for item 4? And items requiring board action? No. Superintendent's comments?
Yep, just one today. I had a chance to meet with Senator Gallivan and with a number of other local superintendents that are within his region. And so we had a good discussion about the progress that they're making with the budget. And he is very hopeful that it will be on time, or close to on time. So that will be very helpful for us as we plan. We go through the budget process today and at the end of the month. And then I received something I noticed today, just an update on where the House and Senate are on some of the hot ticket items. And it looks like some really good news for us. And I'll just share a couple of the elements. Both houses are included funding for universal meals. So that's a really positive thing. And it's around $280 million. So of that. Also, both houses are looking at changes to the pre-K funding and distribution. They're not on the same page, but they're both interested in making that happen as well. Let's see what else.
What sort of changes?
They didn't say exactly, but I'm sure we'll get some additional information. Right now, for us, I think the funding that has been promised is solid. But it looks like what they've been doing is actually expanding pre-K, and so that's the direction they typically have been moving in. So that would be good for us. Let's see. Oh yeah, and then also the capital outlay. The discussion. Both houses are supporting the move to $250,000 from $100,000 right now, which again would be helpful for all of us. And then there's a few other things, but in general, it sounds like these things will be really helpful to the school in general.
Well, both. I read a similar article, and both houses are supporting eliminating the requirement that there be a set aside for tutoring from the foundation aid.
That's another piece.
And that was supported by both houses, so it's interesting to see if the governor supports that.
Thank you for your updates. Item 7, board presidents and board member comments. I have a couple of things. The policy committee met again since we last had a public meeting, and the work continues as you in your agenda. Thank you all. The state comptroller's audit has started, so Ms. George can give us ongoing updates with that, but Ms. George, Mr. Russ, and I met with the 2 auditors. All board members should be aware that at some point you will each get a call from the auditor to answer a couple of questions. So any questions at any point, you can see Ms. George, Mr. Russ, or me. And I believe you all received a letter from our current ECASB Executive Director, David Lowry, who would like to throw his hat in the ring for the soon-to-be vacated NYSBA Area 1 seat that has been held by Linda Hoffman for a number of years. Linda has announced that she'll be stepping down. So we have an opportunity to nominate Mr. Lowry and or vote for him. That's all I have. Ms. Zillweiler.
I just have one thing that I noticed when I was reading Mr. Brown's parent blast, that there, through the community ad, there's going to be 3 upcoming classes called Banking 101, Borrowing Money, and Budgeting Basics that are for middle school and high school. And one of the classes is actually over the summer. And any student who happens to be here that's a senior right now, even though you've graduated, you could still take the class as well. So I was very happy to see, and it's free. They're all free. You just have to register. So I was really happy to see that that some of our students are going to be getting some of these very important financial things that they need to learn. So I was really happy to saw that.
It'd be helpful
when I
to
saw
a few
that.
bankers to take that course.
So that's all I had. Thank you.
Not too much happened in the last 2 weeks since our last meeting, but I was able to speak with Mr. Lombardo, Mr. Librock, and Mr. Roberts about the community had expressed interest in having some sort of CPR course, training, first aid, something that the community could get involved in, and was there something we could do? So we're in the process. We have a couple dates. We're really hoping to get the April 19th date to work. But we have a couple dates, and we're hoping to do it before it interferes, spring sports becomes, and all the spring activities and concerts and all that. So we're trying to get it in that little tiny window, and sooner than better, especially with all the sports starting. So that's it. We'll let you know next week.
Why did you pick April 19th?
Well, because that's the only thing on the school calendar was the board meeting.
Wow.
So we thought, what if we did it before the board meeting? Then maybe we could get community members to come out to learn some CPR. And we're doing it would be just like an hour-long course. So it's not the full certification. And if they were interested, they could go do that. We would give them information so they could come to that. And if they felt like coming after, they would certainly be welcome.
Sounds great. We talked about these kinds of needs at the safety committee meeting the last time, and how important it is for people to be able to help until help arrives.
Yeah.
So the more people we can get trained, the better. I'm all for it.
Absolutely.
The community wants it, so
Absolutely.
thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
I don't have anything except for, I guess, a follow-up question to you brought up is the audit. So I got the email about that, and I was curious at what is it at the end of the audit that anything is made public? Because so I get the comptroller's newsletter weekly, and I go through the audits that come in there. There's not much in there, but I was just wondering if that's like the only time at which, or through the steps, is there any information that's made public?
I can answer it. Everything is confidential until the audit is totally complete. And we have our exit audit with the comptroller. And then it's still confidential until they issue their report, which could be 2 to 3 months after our exit interview.
And that's the findings, the audit itself, like the purpose of the audit, is that something that's, or is that just standard, all of them, it's the standard purpose for all audits?
No, there's different purposes. I can update right now on our auditor's name is Bob Hansen. He's set up actually in an office in the basement. It's the only space we had. And he's in the process of auditing the ERS pension system, which is something they do with every single school audit. And they do it for the pension system, and doing their risk assessment. So for the next 2 to 3 weeks, he's going around and talking to people to do his risk assessment. And then at some point, he'll meet with Ms. Armbrust, Mr. Russ, and myself to discuss what they're going to focus on. And then we can ask him at that point if that still remains confidential or if we can share that with the board.
Yeah, and in your experience, have they ever not had recommendations?
We always have
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was declared from the get-go that they would be the, what is it called? These are the things you're doing wrong, fix them letter.
Oh, the CAP. Yeah, we have to do the corrective action plan.
Yes. Your corrective action plan will be, like, how do you know we're gonna have a, yes. Your corrective action plan will be delivered at this point. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Mr. Casey, so the audit is standard because all school districts go through it. But when they go through the risk assessment, every school in that regard, they focus on different things just based on the information.
Yeah, and I've noticed that in their findings and their reports that they put out is that it's often very, very specific on something, one thing, and leads me to believe that's what they could find.
They get very narrow in their focus. Last time they spent almost the entire audit focused on the co-curricular programs and funding and the financing of the co-curricular athletics, clubs, sports, those kinds of things. The time before that, it was transportation they were focusing on. So you really don't know until they tell you what they're going to look at. But they are very, very close to the vest with regard to their findings. They don't want to, and frankly, they don't want to meet with. I mean, I've been involved in 2 previous audits as a board member and before that as well, and I tried both times to convince them to have a frank discussion with the board or with the audit committee, for instance, and they would hear none of it. You know, when they produce their findings, then we respond with a corrective action plan. And the wisest thing to do is to agree with their findings and explain how appreciative you are that they're pointing these out and how you're going to address these minor issues that have to be addressed, because they're always relatively minor issues. And when you do that, it just brings the whole temperature down, and everything turns out fine.
Their job every 5 years or so, and it's
Sure.
been stretched for pandemic. So our turn.
I'd had these questions. I meant to catch someone at some point in time, but I also thought maybe it would be good for other people to hear some of these. I appreciate the responses.
Risky.
Well, and our audit committee chair can ask to meet with them. I'm sure they'd be delighted to meet with you to
I'm sure they'd be
discuss
doing that.
whatever concerns.
I've been through 5 of them in my career. So
Yeah.
it's, the one I'm dealing with now is just focus. It's narrowed down to IT in the district I'm
Oh, in
working.
the other district where you work?
Yeah, you're right. They take a lot of general information, do a lot of interviews, and then they have that narrow focus. Yeah. No,
What else do you have tonight, Mr. Flowers?
what's that?
So what else do you have tonight?
I got some really good stuff.
All right.
Yeah. The Budget and Finance Committee met on March 9th. Mr. Brunson and Mrs. Daniel attended the meeting along with the superintendent and business administrator. The committee members reviewed updated 23-24 projected BOCES costs. As you know, the costs are based on school district's request for service, as well as the district share of BOCES administrative and capital costs. So we had another look at that. The committee members also reviewed updated salary and fringe benefit cost projections for 23-24. The projections included shifting more salaries and benefits from the grants to the general fund in 23-24. We've talked about that publicly several times. The committee members also reviewed updated version of the entire projected budget for 23-24. Both estimated appropriations and estimated revenues were reviewed. Members of the committee offered suggestions regarding personnel, appropriation of fund balance options, revenue adjustments, etc. Mrs. Superintendent reminded us that the state budget has not been finalized, so that could impact our budget estimates, either positively or negatively, or maybe those are the numbers. And we still need more information regarding sales tax before we nail down the revenue. The committee members reviewed 2 correspondences. One was a clarification of the process for recording the expenditure of funds transferred from the capital reserve to the capital fund, and that information was much appreciated. The second correspondence addressed the prior year expense recovery question that was asked previously by a committee member, and we got a satisfactory response to that. So, it was a good meeting, a lot of discussion going on, but the budget process is moving right along, and I think tonight will be very informative for the board. I think was that everything, Dan?
Yeah, sounds good, Paul. It's a very productive committee and very appreciative. We as board members are very appreciative to have this opportunity to work closely with the manager and the superintendent to help to organize things so that it's easier for the whole board to address these various issues. So I think it's going very well. Thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask, and I don't know if you said it already, when does the state finalize their budget?
Well, the April
April
1st is when they're supposed to.
Does that happen usually on time?
Close, usually.
Okay,
Yes.
so then we adapt ours, and then
April
find out theirs for sure. Okay.
Good question.
But even if they haven't adopted a budget by April 1st, and even if they haven't by the time we are required to, we are still required to adopt a budget with the best information we have available at that time.
Mr. Brunson, anything else tonight?
Nothing. Thank you.
No? Said, thank you. Any administrators who have anything to share with the board this evening? Mr. Brown?
Really brief, yes. First, I'd like to thank you, Supervisor, for reading my Tuesday class. I'd like to say I'm feeling really old because a few first graders that I had back in the day are sitting here seniors.
Aw.
It's humbling to know how old I'm getting. Well, great to see them. So 2 brief things. Number 1, next Wednesday, you'll see in the district calendar, it says the middle school talent show is taking place. We're actually postponing that. We weren't quite ready because the drama club went a little late. So that will take place April 13th. So I just didn't want anyone showing up. We've informed our parents that, but just in case any board members were thinking of swinging by.
Mr. Brown, what was the time on that?
I believe 7 o'clock. Yep, and it'll be up at the high school in the auditorium on April 13th. And then the next thing is just to save the date for May 18th is our LEAP capstone that will take place up at the Knox main house, the Knox Mansion. We're bringing that back to that venue. We're very excited about that. And we will have formal invitations for everyone on the board in the upcoming weeks. But I just wanted you to save that date if you're interested in coming. Thank you.
What was the day again?
May 18th for that one. And I believe that's going to be 6:30, but you will receive an invitation.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
May I just make a comment? And tomorrow we're recording our podcast for the Erie Niagara Superintendents Association, What Brings You Joy in Education podcast series, and we're focusing on the LEAD program at the middle school.
Oh, nice.
So we'll share that with you when it's published.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Roberts.
Just quickly, as Mrs. Improto was referencing earlier, the calendar is starting to get busy as we head into springtime. And I just want to highlight a couple things that are happening this week at the high school. Next week is our first ever Inclusion Week. So we're going to be celebrating with Spirit Days every day. The week is organized by our Youth Activation Club, which works to promote our unified sports at the high school. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to be highlighting through Spirit Days, and they will be promoted through Blue Devil TV with commercials every morning as well. So Monday we have Choose to Include Day. Tuesday is Down Syndrome Day. Wednesday is Williams Syndrome Day. Thursday is focusing on ADHD, and Friday is Autism Awareness Day. So each day students will be wearing different colors, different outfits to promote the recognition of those specific days of awareness. At the end of the week, we have our Euro Dance, which is back on Friday night. And after the Euro Dance, the lock-in is back. So we'll have activities at the high school, I think, till midnight on Friday night. Then on Saturday morning, about a year ago, I had at that time, a junior young lady come to see me who wanted to coordinate a women's leadership conference at East Aurora High School. So a year later, we have that taking place next Saturday morning. There's a keynote speaker, there are workshops throughout the morning, and a real nice compliment to Women's History Month. So if there's anyone who's interested or wants more information on that, let me know. That is next Saturday morning, and we appreciate the foundation for supporting that event with a substantial grant. So thank you, Dan, and the foundation for that.
I'll pass that along. Thank you.
And then on
Roberts?
Sunday,
Mr. Roberts, do you
Yes,
know
sir.
by chance who the keynote speaker is off the top of your head?
Oh, I
Oh.
can tell you. I
Oh,
have
do you
that.
have it?
Yeah.
Did we get information?
I have information on it.
Oh.
They'd reached out to a couple of board members and asked us to give the seminar about being on the board. So, this is just gonna do it. Let me just say, Mr. Roberts, I am so impressed with this young woman who is decided to do this endeavor and is going through and all the hard work as other people have helped her that have put into this. But to have a senior really take this on is amazing.
You want to read out?
International
The
Institute.
keynote speaker
Okay.
is Jennifer Rizzo Choi, the Executive Director of the International Institute.
Thank you.
And I'll say, I learned about it by watching Wake Up EA on Blue Devil TV. So if you don't subscribe to Blue Devil TV, do it and watch
Yeah.
Wake Up EA every morning. It's a great way to start your day.
There you go.
And it's hysterical. I love it. There have been some really good ones lately, so.
Our audience is
Yeah,
questioning
they're-
your morning choices.
It's a routine, right? I gotta know what you guys are up to.
And when parents ask, or like, they're like, we don't know what's going on, at the high school, for example. I'm like, honestly, you just watch that. You'll know exactly what's happening, and then you can ask your kids about it. But it's available and interesting, entertaining.
It is entertaining.
Another celebrity who is going to participate in this event by doing a workshop for, along with several other dignitaries, is Mrs. Armbrust. I noticed that your name was prominently displayed on the list
Oh,
of.
Great. No, I look forward to it. I'll talk to anybody.
And then if I can, finally, on Sunday, so next weekend is our annual badminton tournament, which I believe has maybe 1 or 2 slots available. And looking forward to that. My partner is in the audience over there. She's probably hiding, my partner. So looking forward to a weekend full of events.
Fantastic. Thank you very
What
much.
time is the badminton tournament?
Starts at 9 and goes till 2. So there's different categories. So
Did you win last year?
no, it's been a number of years.
Thought so.
No pressure.
I thought so.
I'm entered in 2 of the 3 divisions and hopes to win one of them. Yes.
One year we had a ringer in there.
Yes.
You remember?
It's been a number of years.
Yes.
Mr. Membretti.
Yes. Mrs. Lyons cannot be here tonight, but she asked me to remind the board that Friday we'll be celebrating wellness. Students, you get to celebrate wellness with a day off, and faculty, staff, and board members, you are welcome to be at the high school anytime from 8 to 3. I'll make sure your clerk will get you the latest and greatest up-to-date agenda. If you remember, I think Ms. Oweather, for sure, you were there last year with Mike Vinay, remember, and that presentation. We have a series of, it's bigger and better every year. So anytime at all, 8 to 3, Friday up at our high school, come get well.
Much.
Just to thank Lisa Brown, who coordinated the event, to secure a wide range of wellness activities for our staff, and so it should be a pretty exciting day.
Anyone else this evening?
Just tomorrow, we have our STEAM night. It's going to be a fabulous night of lots of presentations, and our kids are super excited. So come on out. It starts at 6, and we go to 8.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pantoja. I hope it's a great evening for everyone.
That's always lots of fun.
Anything else this evening? Thank you all for being here. Moving on to community comments. We did not have any, so thank you all for being in attendance this evening. I'll remind the board that you had received email from Ms. Lyons and from Jason Edwards. You received those and read them?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 10, reports and discussion items. Item A, Ms. George.
Yes, we have the grid tonight, which Mr. Membretti is going to pass out, but also, I just wanted to bring the board's attention to, in the news this week, the failed banks in California. Our investment company has reached out to us. I apologize, it's a 2-sided document, and I only made one side for you. But all of our investments are fully collateralized and fully insured, and NICLAS does not expect the closure of the failed banks to have any impact on our investments and on NICLAS's operations. So I just thought it was important. It's a newsworthy item for the board.
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate this.
Reassuring, thank you.
At the same time, you should have the grid in front of you. Not a lot has changed since last time, but that which did change was to the better. You'll see our expenses are more or less in line with where they've been, so no real update there. The good news where we're seeing it is in the unexpected revenue, which is the revenue that's beyond what we budgeted for. So positive numbers here are good. We have the final number of property tax. That's the final number for penalties and interest. State aid, you're going to see a conservative estimate there, but definitely trending in the right direction. We're still waiting on excess final aid cost, but that definitely looks helpful. Erie County sales tax, again, received our second payment. It appears we're going to be over budget, but still unsure how, but we're conservatively putting those numbers in there. The next one is interest earnings and rates. We again are forecasting that's going to continue to trend even more positive than it looks, but we feel comfortable giving you that number now. And then the last one is the realization of some FEMA aid and UPK
Integrated class.
reimbursement or aid or whatever you want to call it. So I for the last few years we've done this. This started off to kind of make sure that we were not having a mid-year surprise. The last few years, each year, we've kind of figured out another category to that has kind of driven the ship here. And I told you, there's not infinite rabbits in this hat that we're pulling out, and obviously the revenue ones are the ones that we can least control. We think our expenditure budget is pretty much as close as it can get, so we're not going to realize major savings there. Revenue is where we're going to actually come out ahead this year, but again, that is totally outside of our control for the most part. So I'd say this is a pretty dialed in number. And again, where a big chunk of that number is that 354,000 comes from FEMA funding and reimbursement. So that's money we spent and came back. So yes, it helps this budget, but that's not like repeatable or like that's a one-time get out of jail free. I mean, not that we're in jail, but that's a one-time rabbit pulling out of a hat. Yeah, I know the auditors are here. I didn't want to say that. So overall, it continues to work and work well. You're going to see that, when everything adds up, we're at about 1.1 to the good. But again, 354,000 of that is a one-time reimbursement of money that was spent. And I also need you to remember that this year, about the first 415,000 that's going to be spoken for in the appropriated fund balance. So, we're a couple $100,000 to the good, which to us sounds like big money, but in a $41 million organization is a pretty tight budget that we're running here, and we're running it as conservatively as possible.
Thank you very much.
Questions on the grid?
Thank you as always for the information. Moving on to item B, proposed 2023-2024 district calendar.
Okay, I am going to play the role of Mrs. Lyons at the moment. So I'm going to do the best I can and go from there. You should have a copy. It's I'm going to argue that it's gold colored this year, although it's kind of more of a peanut butter color. What you're going to see is pretty much the standard calendar. The superintendent's conference days more or less fall where they have fallen the last few years. There's not a ton to really call your attention to. What I do want to call, what we get the most questions on are always when the breaks fall. The December, the winter break continues to fall that week between Christmas and New Year's. February break continues to be President's Day week. You're going to notice we have an extended spring recess this year because it follows the Easter holiday, but it also extends one day further than that. We had the day, and the reason many districts are taking that day off, there's like some crazy solar eclipse happening that day, and it's happening, like people are going to come from all over the world to see nothing because it's going to be black, but they're going to come from all over the world to see the darkness. And we talked about making it a school event, but the peak of it is at 3 o'clock, just as we're in the middle of dismissal and all the rest of that. So many school districts, because it's tied to break, are just giving that day extra as well. So school would start the Wednesday after Labor Day. We did add in the long weekend for Memorial Day this year, and the last day for students would be Wednesday the 26th. Last day for staff would be Thursday the 27th.
And other than that, we pretty much follow the Erie 2 BOCES calendar, which follows the Erie 1 BOCES calendar, and goes from there. So any specific questions about this? I saw Kim and then Terry. Yep.
No, I just wondered, what day are we doing graduation? I didn't see it on there. Is it the 29th or the 30th?
Saturday or Sunday, Mr. Roberts?
It's up for debate because it's such a late calendar. Traditionally it would be that Saturday, which is the
Right.
29th, but Mr. Russ and I talked about would we consider something on Friday, but haven't decided just yet.
Are we gonna have that on the calendar though? That seems like something we should have on the calendar.
It would be on the,
Yeah, so we don't need it on this one. We don't
They
need it
don't
on
print
this.
that till
Okay.
on
summertime.
the big calendar.
Okay.
12-month calendar, yes. Ms. Lowell.
No, I answered my question, the little triangle for December 1st.
Right, and that's something that we've done the last 2 or 3 years where it was always parent-teacher conferences, but high school runs it slightly different, so it didn't quite work. So that's a day that the high schoolers will be in session, but the middle school in Parkdale will have a full day of parent-teacher conferences.
And the extra day for eclipse and spring break is not deducting from snow days or anything else?
No, so it works out, and again, it always depends. You have to start where the Regions puts its last day and then work backwards. And some of that depends on where it is what it is, where Easter and Christmas especially fall, and then where Labor Day falls. We'll have 182 days, and again, for high school, 181 for elementary and middle. We do have 4 additional days because superintendent's conference days can count towards that too. So we have 5 or 6 days built in. The other interesting part that I'll be bringing to you in July is we now will, if we have a plan, which is what I'm going to bring to you in July, the superintendent can make a emergency closing day or a snow day into a remote day and have that count. So the fear of it breaking into a break is not as real as it's ever been. Because if there is something, he or she, whoever he can. I got a lot of coffee today. I'm sorry. Woo! One of those days, the superintendent can call a remote day once we have an approved plan, which our plan is to do on July. I'm going to stop being Miss Lyons now. Okay, that was all her.
That was great.
That was all her.
On the calendar? Additional questions on the calendar. Thank you very much. Moving right along, item C, the draft 2023 budget.
Welcome, everyone. So we'll just get started with the next edition of the 23 budget. Here's the items that we'll cover in my presentation. Again, there are some updates, but not a lot of updates because it's just been 2 weeks and we haven't gotten a lot of new information. But there are some changes. Again, driving force is the values of the district. Our goals are always focused on our students' needs and the needs of our staff, so that's kind of the driving force behind all of our decision making. And so the Budget Finance, as Mr. Blauer said, the Budget Finance Committee continues to meet. And, we start in right after the winter holiday in January. And I think I want to thank the committee because this is a pretty heavy lift. There's lots of information. It's pretty complicated stuff. We don't have a lot of information, so there's a lot of estimations and things like that early on. So the committee has to be really patient and work through all the financial documents that Mrs. George supplies. But I think it's a really critical component of moving the budget process forward. I think it's really valuable and helpful in regard to getting us here today. So FEMA update, you can see it. We spoke about that in the chart. Some good news and some not so good news for the tents and materials and supplies and testing. We were informed by FEMA that the tents that we needed to buy and do our outdoor lunches would not be covered. So that money has been removed, but that money is on our way. So we've made some really nice progress. All the areas have been paid except for the distribution of meals. We continue to work with the Senator Schumer and his office to help us to get at least part of that reimbursement, because you can see it's pretty significant, it's just a little bit. We had to thank Mrs. Oppenheimer and Ms. George's office and Ms. George for the continuous work on this.
Very persistent.
Yes. Lots of letters, lots of phone calls, and so we really appreciate your effort. Reserve funds, again, you know, we're going through this, and this is going to adjust a little bit as the budget becomes clearer, what revenues we'll have left over, how our appropriations and our spending.
I'm sorry,
No problem.
Mr. Russ, just
Yeah.
back to the
Sure.
tents. Are we able to, I see that we appealed the first one. Can we appeal that, or is that something that is
It's
not-
totally disqualified, so
They
it's
just
not
said no.
appealable.
Okay,
Mm-mm.
okay.
We
Thank
get a
you.
letter when we can appeal, and they just said this doesn't qualify.
Sorry, thank you.
These were rental tents?
No, they were tents we purchased.
Ah, so we still have them?
Yes. Yeah, we use them for a
Sure.
variety of activities.
Great. Yeah.
Usually outside if they were.
We got something out of the deal. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, so reserves, again, part of the budget process, you know, some information from the state is that we really want to keep this budget, the reserves, as part of our ongoing discussion. Again, a lot doesn't change, and we've talked about what we would think about funding or where we might draw from, depending on how our finances look towards the end of the school year. And so, has anything changed here?
We just added that we might want to fund the liability reserve. We talked about that, I think it was 2 weeks ago, or it was at finance. I don't remember. It all starts blurring.
And one of the propositions you'll see later, the second proposition that will be voted on is to remove monies from the technology reserve to buy new Chromebooks for our which will be our next year's 5th and 9th graders. So that'll be probably a reserve that we do draw from more than. So here we are, the governor's state aid runs, and we've gotten some adjustments, nothing too dramatic. As you can see, some things in BOCES aid. Again, one thing that's kind of still out there and we're waiting on, we're really hoping that will come in a much more positive way, is the high cost excess aid and the private excess cost aid. So we're waiting to hear, but I'm sure just feeling that that should be significantly higher than what they're estimating at this point in time. And I think that's about it. So a new slide is new and resumed state revenues. So you can see here the pre-K program for our students with disabilities. We talked about that before, about how we had to make a special application to the state. We have an integrated co-taught program for our students in pre-K, and that it will generate about $145,000 in additional aid, which we were unaware of. So at the time when it happened, which is a really great shot in the arm. And so that's going to be adjusted. The projected amount for next year is actually less because there are fewer students that will be in the program. Yep. So we're pretty excited about that. Yep.
If I could just draw your attention to your grid that Mr. Mambretti passed out, where it says FEMA, an integrated program. It's the money that we've received to date of that 145 added to the FEMA money received to date. So that's part of that.
354.
And then some resumed aid. We got some additional stack aid that we weren't expecting. So again, that's just a hair over $70,000. So these were two nice surprises that came to us this year. No, there it is.
There it is.
Definition of budget neutral. We had this discussion in our last meeting about what does budget neutral mean. So it kind of has two possible definitions, and again, it is challenging to define every word that we use in the budget process. Right? So people that aren't involved in the school on a daily basis, sometimes the language is a little bit confusing, but we're doing our best to try to explain those elements. And we encourage anybody, if they do have questions, give my office a call, and we're happy to talk with them. Talk it through. But here, so it's an item that has been budgeted year to year, is continuing to be included in the upcoming budget. So something that we've already been paying for and we're just going to be moving forward could be budget neutral. A second is an item that is being added to the new budget replaces something that's being removed from the new budget. So we're not going to do this anymore, and we're gonna kind of use that money to support this new program. So that's basically like the two, I guess, concepts or ideas where it's budget neutral.
That's an important concept, the last one you just said, because I've often heard people who are concerned or critical of the budget process saying, we always add anything, we never take anything away. You know, and that's not true. You know, so there are some cases where something is no longer needed, but something else is needed, and so you're funding it not through additional taxes, but from the fact that you've made a savings somewhere else in the budget.
Folks to exchange or trade off and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And you set me up next, for the next thing, the budget reductions. People also say that you never reduce the budget, but we're actually reducing our BOCES budget by a little over $385,000, which is significant. So again, thanks to the team that, really, the budget, BOCES budget is, there's a lot to it, and lots of items, and a lot of good and important things and services that we get from them. Each year we review what we pull back on, and so we've been able to save $385,000. So thank the team for their efforts.
And this is a good example of how it replaces. We brought this current year 1818 room back, and that's part of this. Now we don't need that service at BOCES because we have that service here, but that impacts salaries because we have to hire people to teach those classes. So it's part of that budget neutral where it just shifts.
Impacts revenue.
Right, where it shifts from.
And something like that has like a kind of a two factors. It's effectively bringing students back to school, right? They're not going to be educated outside of the district, they're educated within the district, which we always want. And then, like an offshoot of that is that we are actually going to save some money. So it's a positive thing all the way around. Budget priorities, again, we're making some progress here. We're kind of narrowing it down to the things that have been included. You'll see that the items in bold are those that are not included in the budget projections at this point in time. Again, it's just a few things, and we've had discussions about why these things are happening at all the different buildings and in the different departments. You can see the building stuff is still on our radar. We're really hoping that may come through like a one-time fund through monies that are not in the federal funds, but then that would not be supported maybe for the 24-25 school year. So we're still working through that because there are some monies left in those accounts. Let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Russ, the $25,000 that we have budgeted for the cyber insurance, I know that's been kind of the number all along. And we had talked about whether or not we were going to get something more definitive. Is that basically what that number is going to be for that?
I have not received any updated definitive number yet. There's a lot involved in the cost of cyber insurance, such as dual authentication. Did I say it right? Dual authentication, which we all have now for all our devices. There's different levels of that we have to do in order to secure the insurance.
Right. This is increased cyber insurance. So we have cyber insurance. This is just to jump up another level. So we're putting it at.
Correct. Currently, we have $1 million of coverage, but typically school districts that have to use their cyber insurance, how much are the claims?
The K through 12 school average right now in all cybersecurity insurance loss is $4.33 million.
So it's to increase our coverage.
Right.
So we're still working on that.
Still working on that. Okay.
If you don't mind me jumping in, the steps that they're expecting that will decrease our risk and offer us more for our money, we are taking. So we have added a number of new cybersecurity initiatives that have tightened up, put our shields up around here. So as we apply now, we need to be fully reevaluated because our answers last year got us a certain rate at a certain dollar amount. We're doing so much better. I'm hoping that we'll get more insurance and the cost will not be as hefty for that additional coverage.
Thank you.
Brian, can you go back to that last slide? I'm sorry. 2 weeks ago, you had the Chromebook replacements and iPad carts under question whether it was tech reserves. You decided not to put that in.
Yes, that is the amount for the tech reserve. It's 75,000. I took the tech reserve out and I just put the dollar amounts in there. So if you add those two numbers together, it comes to 75. And you'll see the proposition for the use of the tech reserve. I guess I could add use of tech reserve here.
Again, here you can see we've been able to include most of the things that we've discussed in the budget. The bigger items are the building subs, and a lot of these items are, $1,600, $5,000. Not huge amounts, necessarily just to keep people's swimming. The AEDs is something else we're continuing to work on. We'll see where that goes. How we kind of phase that in, maybe over a couple of years. Well, again, modified lacrosse and indoor track, we're really confident that will be brought into the budget. And two small amounts that we'll probably be able to absorb as things, get clearer over the next couple of weeks. Let's see, again, for special education, Ms. Marinaccio's been working very closely with Mrs. George based on referrals and the information that we've received from the department so far in regard to some of the needs for that department. We have had an increase in referrals over the last few months. We're going to see how that continues over the next to the end of the school year. We're starting annual reviews, so that'll help us as well to make sure that number's accurate. The SEL coordinator, we're talking about that too, talking about hiring somebody or looking at maybe a consultant model. So we'll have a better picture for you by the 29th in regard to that role. Let's see what else is there.
Brian, at the last meeting, you had nothing down for the TOSA adjustments, and now you do.
Yeah, so we looked at the TOSA adjustments, and that would be, those roles are for Mr. Lombardo, who's currently sitting in the teacher on special assignment as the athletic director, moving him over to the position of director of health, PE, and athletics. And so that will happen hopefully sometime during the next school year, maybe mid-year. And then also the person who is in Mrs. Marinaccio's, Aaron Jameson, who is working in that role of doing all the stacking and that has been very lucrative. She's done a fantastic job of finding new resources and bringing in additional dollars based on the
the filings that we have to do are very cumbersome in order to get the money we're owed back. And to have the human resources available to actually take the time to file for those is so beneficial.
And so what that number represents is the conversion from a 10-month to a 12-month schedule, as well as an adjustment for moving from the teaching ranks to the administrative ranks.
So it's just for the two TOSA.
Those are for the two TOSA.
Correct, and it's an estimate because negotiations haven't happened. It's just a placeholder.
Negotiate with the two different presidents and the administrator. So we'll work on it. Yeah, so here we go. We talked about the stimulus funding positions. Here we are again, and all these have been moved over. They're being moved over to the general fund. The only ones that are still outstanding are the building level subs, and we're going to continue to work on that in terms of the funding for this particular year. We don't know what the long-term viability of having all three of them stay in the budget. Maybe one in the long run, maybe two, or maybe three, depending on our finances go.
Thank you, Mr. Russell, Ms. George, for your management, transitioning us those FEMA dollars.
So the ones that are not bold are in the budget,
Right, yes, right.
and we don't have to rely on stimulus funding going forward for years to gain those positions.
So here it is, the appropriations budget. You can see, again, the big thing to look at here is the reduction in our BOCES expenses, which is really significant. Again, thank everybody for working on that and making that happen. Because that has a really significant impact on the budget as a whole. Again, we've talked about these. These things really haven't changed over the last couple of weeks or even months, very much besides that BOCES piece.
The transportation piece, that's just the contracts we have in place and.
And doing an assumed, CPI increase.
We do it every year.
So revenues, here we are. Again, taking a look at that, like through the chart, things are looking pretty positive. Moving in the right direction for us for sure. Any things that's changed?
The biggest significant would be under the state aid. And that's because although it's not part of the governor's run, but it's the information we know from this slide has been added into state aid because that's where it's recorded. The information from this slide has been added into state aid, even though it's not part of the governor's run.
The UPK,
But,
what is that one year?
Yeah, what?
yeah, this slide. But it's not the UPK program, it's the integrated program into UPK that the CPSE through the county pays us. And it's driven by the number of students who are participating. So that's been added into the state aid numbers.
Again, capital outlay, looking at the replacement of the phones, the primary focus. We just got some good news today. We're gonna just, Mr. Maizano shared some information. We haven't had a chance to talk about it, but it looks like it's really moving in the right direction. We're really having a difficulty with the wiring component of it. There was just nobody available to actually do the wiring. So we found a new solution. It's actually gonna save us some money and will hopefully allow us to do some of the other things in the outlay project. So it's, really positive thing after many, many months of frustration. So thank you again for working on that. Levy limit, again, we can keep this as part of the every presentation. Nothing really has changed here. The levy limit for 2024 is 3.13. At some point, the board will have to make that decision about where the levy will be placed. But we could go above 3.13. We really don't want to. And the idea is that we're going to go out at the cap or somewhere below.
I think the important thing that I hit on every budget presentation, this is just a formula that comes to the cap. And, each piece of the formula is dictated. There's a way to do that by the state. And it's just in a formula. And this is what our formula looks like for this year, but no, as Mr. Russ said, no decisions have been made on what the levy will actually be.
And I think one of the biggest factors here in terms of the influence on the levy is our growth factor. We've had significant growth in the community over the last, it has to be 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, you can follow it across.
Yeah. And so that is what, like, we talk about 2%, but it really isn't 2% because these are all the factors that Ms. George has to calculate to finally get the final number. The tax rates again, any thoughts, Ms. George?
Just an estimate, just as I say each year. I base it off of our current year assessed value and our current year equalization rates. I don't get that information until later after the budget's been adopted, actually. We get it on July, August is when we get that information. So it's just an assumed based on what it is today, what I know today.
So the projected budget, current budget is $41,296,498. The proposed increase is $2,383,264 for a proposed budget for 23-24 of $43,677,762, which is about 5.77% increase budget. One thing we added here, the gap you can see is relatively small. It's just a little bit over $9,000, so feeling pretty good about that. But again, we still have some things that haven't been included, and we're waiting to see the final numbers for revenues and expenditures. So that will hopefully work itself out by the 29th, so that we're ready to go for April, adopting the budget April 19th. But we talked about the impact of the taxes on House So we did, Mr. Arch provided both $100,000 full value home and house assessed at $100,000, and you can see the increase per year is relatively the same, depending on which of those two formulas you use. So it's about $40 for the year, so $3.5 a month. So it's a relatively
Right, and a little bit of difference, that's because the formulas, when you do the tax rate, it goes out to like 8 decimal points. And when you calculate it, there's just pennies difference when you do it.
So again, looking at the bottom, you can see all the budget decisions that we made so far and that we're considering adding to the budget are really based on our student. That's the driving force. And every decision we make, what do they need and how are we going to provide that with them? And also, considering the staff needs as well as we're working through that process. Oops. So again, here's our expenditures. Again, we come in below the average expenditure in Erie County by about $1,500. And if we look at all states, all schools across New York State, we're considering there's a considerable difference of about $7,000. So again, we're doing well, trying to keep expenses as tight as we possibly can while offering our kids a pretty robust experience. So Proposition 1 will be a vote on the budget itself. You can see the numbers haven't been filled in yet because we haven't made that determination. And then the second proposition will be, as we talked about it a little earlier, is the $75,000 that we would like to draw from the technology reserve to pay for Chromebooks. And so far that process has worked pretty well. So the student comes in first, when they get in first grade, they get a Chromebook. They use it through fourth grade. They get a new Chromebook in fifth grade. They use it through the middle school years. And then they're given another Chromebook in ninth grade, and they use that for the rest of their high school years. And so we're just getting started through that cycle. They're really rated for about 3 years, so we're stretching it a little bit, but so far so good. And so we think that the model's going to work nicely. So here's the budget cycle. We're getting close. It's been a long process. We have another budget workshop on the 29th, and we're really hoping to tie this up and really have more definitive numbers. Really hoping that the budget passes by April 1st at the state level or shortly after that, because that helps us a lot in terms of our approval on the 19th. But as Mr. Brunson said, it doesn't really matter what they do because we have to give it our best shot and approve it on the 19th anyway. And then we
will have a budget on the 19th.
Yes.
No matter what.
And then we go through the process of submitting certain processes and making the budget available. And then we vote on May 16th with the other 699 school districts in New York State. Any questions?
I'm sorry, the 26th one, that's when it's available, that's when we would post it online and, the community will see it?
Yep, that's dictated by law too, how many days prior to the public hearing.
Oh, okay.
And also the information will be shared in the Challenger, and that also has to be in homes of the community by a certain date, so we're taking care of all of those things.
Okay.
Questions from the board? Other questions?
Seniors go.
Thank you for being here.
You can stay. You're welcome to stay. We're not finished yet.
Plus the Weiler, I'd like you to stay.
Oh, man. Unless they have budget.
I have to take them home. I have to drive you home.
We'll eat it in the second fall, the fall and winter as well. This year is the first time.
Question. Oh, I was just gonna say, I just wanted to comment that I thought this was really the way it laid out and the different descriptions and budget neutral and all that information. I think when we post it online, it will be very helpful to the public in terms of how this is laid out. So, thank you very much for everyone's efforts doing
Yeah,
that.
thank you for taking the feedback from the last meeting and Is there any questions? Other comments, questions?
So we're in a discussion thing or just a comment or a question?
Whatever you got.
You wanna go ahead? Something?
No, I mean,
I want to focus on the levy. I'd
Okay,
like to have that discussion.
sure.
There was a discussion that we had at the meeting the other day. And one quick question, Joanne, that you answered at the meeting, that 3.13 included another revenue source, like interest and penalties or something? Or is that the cap at 313?
Yeah, that's the cap, 313.
Okay, it's not 311 or?
No,
Okay,
it's,
good. I just want to make sure the only thing in that line item is taxes. Now, the discussion I'd like to have, and try to keep it as short and compact as I can, the sheet that Mr. McReady handed out is positive. There's going to be certainly excess revenue, excess appropriations that'll add to our fund balance and replenish it. In the report tonight, we moved salaries from the grants to the general fund. We won't be expending that money. We will continue to use the grant money. However, what we're doing is kind of a placeholder to prevent us from falling off the cliff in 24, 25, correct? If I said it, just please. So that's going to add another significant amount to the fund balance year end, a year from now. Then after that, then budgeting will be certainly more difficult.
Yeah.
I think when I look at the appropriated fund balance, and that's a number that you got to be careful of when you use that number. Whatever we agree to, this might be the number of 418. My suggestion would be to get a little bit of this back to the taxpayers. The excess, we've been filling reserves for several years. Our excess appropriations and revenues are going to be solid at the end of this year. And like I say, we're going to be moving salaries. We're not going to use it in the general fund because we need to do that. That's good financial management. But I don't see a reason why we can't, personally, accept a reason if someone has it. But we can't get this levy down in the twos, at least for this year. And I think we're going to have the resources to do that with very little of any impact next year. It's not like I'm saying raise the appropriated fund balance to cover reoccurring expenses, more salaries. What I'm doing is just moving one revenue to the other, and then the levy will be what it is when we put the 23 or 24, 25 budget in place. So that's my comment about it. Certainly, it's the entire board's decision, but there's no reason we can't be in the twos this year.
That was going to be my question as well, Paul. Has the Budget and Finance Committee at all discussed in your meetings lowering the 3.13 to below 3?
Well, sure. And you actually had a number in mind that might work. I thought it was $75,000.
Well, that's the number I use as an example in there,
Yeah.
and what it would bring it down to. Certainly, it could be more than that, or it could be that number. I mean, that's definitely going to get you in the twos. It'll be the high twos.
Yeah, so 75,000 would bring it down to what, 2.8 approximately or
I
something?
don't know the exact amount.
I'd have to run.
I thought like 25 got it to like 3, and then the 50 would bring it down a little farther.
Yeah, so I support what you're suggesting, Paul. I think we promised the taxpayers that we would do our best to stabilize this budgets moving forward in the 2% range. And I know it's impossible to get it down to 2% this year without making significant cuts, which I wouldn't support. But I think Paul has laid out a plan that would not affect the program and would only affect the amount of funds we might be able to move into reserves. And the result would be that we could get it down into the 2.8, 2.7, 2.6, something in that ballpark, closer to what we're projecting for the following year. The projection for the following year was 2.62. I think if we were in that range moving forward, we would get a lot of support from our community.
I would like to see it in the twos as well.
I agree with the discussion that we had about it and the way that you had proposed doing this. I think it makes sense, and especially, in terms of the things that the taxpayers have supported us in all these years, and when we asked them to go over the tax. And they all came out and they supported the programming, and this is not something that's gonna put us in a risky position if we were to do this in terms of looking forward and impacting our reserves, so that we are not gonna have those reserves doing it in this manner.
Maybe 75,000 unless you haven't to put into
Right.
reserves or whatever, but I just think if we're going to do it, it makes sense to do it in this next year.
My concern would always be knowing what we've been through in the not so distant past and needing those reserves would be to review the reserves and make sure we're in good shape. And it looks like only the repair reserve is significantly lower than what it was in 2015 So this says.
Reserves are healthy.
Yeah, the reserves are healthy.
And there's no reason why, by doing what Paul is suggesting, it doesn't mean we can't add money to the reserves. We can, we just won't be able to add quite as much. And so if we want to focus on the repair reserve, we can do that. So we can do both things. We can beef up certain reserves and at the same time acknowledge the taxpayers' situation.
I think it's a wise move.
So would we continue to have the appropriated fund balance at that lower rate in future years, or would we increase it? And if we did, what impact would that have?
I'm sorry.
Whenever you increase appropriated fund balance, it's a negative impact on your finances.
Right.
75,000 is, I think, a very small risk at this point. But as you start building that up, and basically what it is, revenue source, that when you cut that back, it creates a gap. So, I mean, managing it is a crucial part of what certainly the business administrator does, the superintendent, and the board does. You know, managing, it's the number one thing in finance, in my opinion, is managing the fund balance. And right now, we've managed to the point where our reserves are extremely strong. And it's going to have strong reserves, but we've done it over a short period of time. That 6% never went away in the tax levy increase. It's compounded, you know, and that was a good thing and the right decision to make by the board to recommend that to the voters, and they supported that. We're still benefiting from that and some other decisions that are made. So my suggestion is 75,000 is manageable, but as that builds, that appropriated fund balance, it puts a lot of pressure on programs and everything at that point. I just think it's okay right now, personally.
But and we, looking back a number of years, when the budget was significantly lower, we regularly had a $400,000 appropriated fund balance.
Yeah.
I mean, we planned on underexpending the budget by 200,000 and underestimating or overestimating the revenues rather. Just the opposite. We planned on having an excess revenue of 200,000 and excess appropriations of 200,000, and it was just part of the normal operation of our district from year to year. And that was when the total budget was significantly lower than what it is now. So I think this appropriated fund balance that we had to have right now is very manageable. So increasing it slightly, I don't think is a risky proposition.
I don't feel it is either, otherwise I wouldn't recommend it.
Other thoughts from the board? Support this idea around the table?
Yeah, I'd like to see what it looks like in the next one.
That's true. Yeah, let's do it.
So Mr. George and I will work on putting together some different scenarios, and we'll be prepared to share it with you on the 29th.
Great. Thank you. Other thoughts or questions?
We're also going to need to look at the line by line item budget. It's part of our responsibility to monitor all of the spending in the district. And these summary amounts are very helpful and useful for the board for future planning, but we need to do our due diligence and also look at the various line items and ask whatever questions we might have associated with those. So when that comes, since we are planning on adopting the budget on the 19th, we would want to leave the March 29th meeting with most questions answered and with an idea of what that final number is going to be for the budget. So I would suggest that we review the line-by-line item budget sent to us a week or so or more before the 29th, so that we can ask whatever questions, have them answered on the 29th, and then be ready on the 19th to adopt the budget. I would not like to go away on the 19th thinking that, or away on the 29th rather, with a lot of unanswered questions in my mind. I don't think that's good.
Recognizing that it would still be in draft form at that point.
Well, until the budget's adopted, it's always a draft form. So, you know, the problem for the business department, for Paul and for Joanne over the years, is there's always new information. Every day you come into work, there's some new piece of information which messes with your numbers. So it's just the way it is. It's, you know, it's sooner or later you have to kind of draw the line and say, well, here it is. You know, with new information, we'll just have to deal with it, which reminds us all that a budget is just a budget. It's not hard and fast numbers. You never know whether you're going to have more expenditures or less, or whether you're going to have more revenues or less. But the budget hopefully is made in such a way that it's flexible enough to be able to deal with those unanticipated contingencies.
Is it possible to get a draft of the budget to the board, a line-by-line budget?
Well, my goal is a week before. I don't think more than a week before. I'm hoping, I'm shooting for a week before. I don't know if I'll hit a week before. 5 days before, maybe. I'm going to do my best.
Thank you.
Before the 29th.
So sometime next week.
Typically, the board is going to be asking questions of clarification, which can still be answered between the 29th and April 19th. And if we have serious concerns, we should be addressing them as soon as we recognize them. But generally speaking, we're not asking for changes because we're not deeply in the weeds. We are asking for questions of clarification.
It's an educational process for us. We need to, it's a matter of due diligence, and yes, if we see something there that doesn't make any sense, we need to be able to, to us at least, we need to be able to ask that question.
The board certainly can ask questions if we see anything alarming. This is part of our job. Generally, we're in good hands and we don't see anything alarming. So we're not going to be looking for the $2,000 change and asking to not change it. It's more, can you explain the $2,000 change? I would argue we might not even need to know about the $2,000 change. But
if I may, and I know in the past we've received hard copies of those. I feel, I mean, I don't know what the rest of the board, but I was going to say.
Yes, hard copies.
Oh,
I was going to suggest, could we, I don't know that.
You want them electronic?
The house with my stack of hard copies.
Right, I feel like
perhaps only those board members who
Line
need
by
a
line.
hard copy could have them in hard copy if it's reasonable for you to get us electronic copies.
Yes.
Whatever makes less work in your office. I'll build the house if that's better for you.
Yes.
but it's big.
And at the finance meeting on the 21st, I'm going to need direction based on the House and the Senate, what they've come to terms with, hopefully that will get passed into the budget when the budget passes. If those things are included, how to adjust the budget for the 19th.
Other questions, comments? Thank you all. Thank you very much. Mr. Russell, Mr. George. Fantastic. You could rewind a couple of years and think, when would we have ever had a budget discussion that was complete at 8:24? Congrats, everyone.
Well, thank goodness that we're not in positions.
Yes, it makes things a lot easier.
Doing all those nasty things we've had to do in the past.
Moving on to item 11, is there any? Nope, sorry. Moving on to item D. Mr. Russ and Ms. O'Weiler.
Yeah.
Capital Facilities Project.
Well, yeah, we have a meeting tomorrow.
Tomorrow too.
Yeah, so, yeah, so there's like, when we have our board meetings, our facilities meetings don't keep the same days. except I actually met with Steve Sharowski, who's our lead architect. And we took some time to really look at kind of the district at a kind of a long range kind of global outlook, like coordination of materials and supplies. What does it look like? Like bringing some order. Like we've had so many projects happening, these color schemes and those types of things as we continue to do, especially renovate this space, which is getting moved. What do we want to look at? What kind of materials? What's our budget look like? What are we able to do? Looking at materials that are new and innovative and more durable and those kinds of things. So he and I spent, almost like 2 hours together, just kind of talking about that broader vision. So he understands what I'm looking for, we're looking for, now at this project, but also 5, 10, and 20 years down the road. And so we had a really good conversation about trying to rein things in a little bit and to make it a little bit more manageable and a little bit more consistent. And again, just keeping things, the style of the school simple and reflective of our community, arts and crafts, those types of things, how those elements can be reflected. And so we had a really good conversation, and that's really basically been it since our last meeting. But we're meeting tomorrow, and so we'll have a full meeting of the entire facilities team. We'll meet again for updates. We did do a little bit of we looked at some of the, we did meet again with Mr. Brown and I and the team, and Mr. Merceloff was there, Ms. George, and so we went through some of the things that we're preparing for in the classroom spaces and in the restrooms in this building, because that's the first phase, which will happen next spring. Not next spring, excuse me. It's next spring after that, right? When is it?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, next spring. Yeah, it's next spring. Yeah, next spring for the first phase. So we still have some time, but they have to get a lot of design things into the state and then prepare things for CD, and then after that for bids, and then the work will start hopefully maybe around this time next year. Let's do that as well. But that's about it, and like I said, we'll have a full meeting tomorrow, and then things will start to move as we approach the end of the school year, because like those submittals will due to SCD as soon as possible.
I'll be able to attend that meeting.
Yeah.
Tomorrow.
I'll be there tomorrow.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Item 11, is there any legislation to come before the board?
Nope.
Thank you. Item 12, is there any board member who would wish to remove any consensus item from the consent agenda? Yeah, agenda. Thank you. Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Mrs. Ohlweiler. May I have a second?
Oh, second.
Seconded by Mrs. Danu. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 6-0. Item 13. Items requiring board action. Item A, the superintendent recommends that the Board of Education approve for a first reading the policies listed in your agenda. So these are supplanting the remaining policies in the current section 6,000 of the existing policy manual. I have a motion.
Moved. Second.
Moved by Mrs. Ohlweiler, seconded by Mrs. Daniel. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 6-0. Item B, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education perform a first reading to adopt the policies collectively known as the new section 5,000, supplanting the remaining policies in the current 6,000 of the existing policy manual, as detailed in your agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Danu, seconded by Mr. Cassidy. Discussion? Good job, team. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 6-0. Item C, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education perform a first reading to retire the current, or the 6,000 section of the current policy manual with the understanding of their anticipated replacement with the new section 2,000 and 5,000. Moved by Mr. Cassidy, seconded by Mrs. Danu. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. That's it for the policy, isn't it? Look at
Yes,
that.
that's all.
Good
Easy.
job, policy team.
Only 3 sections left.
Yes.
Only 200 pages.
Wow.
We've been warned.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item D,
The superintendent recommends that the Board of Education accept the resignation for the purpose of retirement of Christina Shufro, physical education teacher at the high school, effective July 1, 2023. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cassidy. Moved by Mr. Cassidy, seconded by Mrs. Daniel. All in favor, discussion.
She was just our teacher of the year.
I know.
She was, yes. None of the high.
I was just
yeah.
gonna say,
Yeah.
we should go out on a high note.
Yes, that's the way to finish off. She's just been wonderful and had a great career and had a tremendous influence on our students.
Absolutely.
Just a great colleague to work with, you know. We miss her.
We will celebrate her retirement later in the year, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Item E, the superintendent recommends the Board of Education approve the 2023-2024 school year calendar, as detailed in your attachment. May I have a
So
motion?
moved.
Moved by Mr. Flowers,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Ohlweiler. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Item F. May I have a motion to approve the resolution authorizing the notice of the May 16th annual school district meeting, budget vote, and election as detailed in your agenda? Moved by everyone. Moved by Mrs. Ohlweiler, seconded by Mr. Flowers. Discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Is there anyone who wishes to add an agenda item to a future agenda that we have not already covered? I'm going to remember to ask you. You may have to nudge me. Okay, hearing none. Item 14 lists our upcoming board meetings and conferences.
Is everyone going to be here at the next meeting?
Yes.
As far
Or,
as
I
know.
mean, I don't.
I'm willing.
So I will be the only one, so there will be quorum, so I can do virtual. Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Anything else come before the board? May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Ohlweiler.
Second,
Second.
third, fourth.
They're getting punchy. Seconded by Mr. Cassidy.
That's right.
All those in favor?
I'm gonna-
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Carried 7-0. Thank you very much.